Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. It's Tuesday, February the 14th, the day of love, they say. At least the day that we celebrate it here in the US for a lot of people. I know in other countries it's not such a big deal as we make it here. But usually I come on Wednesdays, but I'm a day early because I have some plans tomorrow night and I won't be available, so I thought I would come on tonight. Anyhow, and it was perfect because it's Valentine's Day and I wanted to share with you some ideas on some of my reflections and musings on the nature of love. And what came up for me this week was moving from the sacrificial heart to the sacred heart. And underneath that came the phrase that the blooming of the soul's passion, the blooming of a soul's passion is the sacred heart or the rose. And what does this all mean for people like us? I know a lot of us like to live on the surface of life because that's what we were taught, it's what we can see. But perhaps you're at the point now where you realize there's much more than meets the eye. There's much more going on in this life than meets the eye. We are both material and non-material beings, and perhaps even you might even wonder or suspect that perhaps it's our non-material aspects which have been the most powerful in creating our reality, how we think, what we feel, our emotions, and then that affects our words and ultimately our actions. And this ability to imagine ourselves is a non-material um, event or action that happens. We imagine our sense of self through images and concepts. And what does this all mean? What does this all mean? How is this related to love? The beauty of love and how we've been taught to see it. Well, I just wanted to share that there may be some of you that might not be feeling the love today. In fact, you might be feeling stressed or concerned about the state of affairs in the world. You might be dealing with some deep emotional stress or turmoil. You might be wondering about your future or the world and how we're going to turn this ship around, let's say. You may be at your wit's end. You may have given all of you've got. You may have areas of your life where you might be feeling really depressed or hopeless. And when we come upon a day like Valentine's Day, where everyone's supposed to be feeling love and happiness and joy, there can be like a disconnect. Like, what's the matter with me? I'm not really connecting to a sense of love and joy. Where is all the love in my life? Damn it. I deserve love. I deserve connection. What's going on? And it's times like this when um, some people might be motivated to stop looking outside for a sense of fulfillment and completion. And to be honest, if I'm going to be honest, on Valentine's Day, I kind of like part of me goes, like, what's all this about anyway? Right? It's such a showy, ostentatious day, um, in some ways. And I mean, In another way, it's like, what could be so harmless about candy hearts that say, will you be mine on them? And as I've gotten older, I realized that it's not the candy, it's not the cards, it's not the flowers, and whether we receive them or not, but everything that these things attempt in one way to cover over. It's like the shadow behind the words, I love you, and what that means for people. And the real sadness, grief, and depression and disappointment around love for many people in many relationships. Um, right? We can have a heartbreak with our country, for example, what our country's doing. We can have a heartbreak with the political system. We could have a heartbreak with our school system and what's being done there. And it's not what they talk about in greeting cards. So um, that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. And in regard to um, what's happening energetically on the planet right now, that can't be disconnected from love. It can't be disconnected from our ability to feel a sense of um, freedom and joy in our bodies and how we live our life and how we see ourselves and our potential and our future. Of course, this affects how we relate to others, our relationships, our ability to relate in a loving way. And so this is also for me amazingly also reflected, right? As above, so below in the sky. And the realization that we are not separate from one another. And what is really the nature of love and how is it affecting us in real ways that allow us to thrive or just survive. And so right now we have the planet of destruction, the planet of regeneration and rebirth, the planet of the evolution of the soul, Pluto, right at the end of Capricorn at 29 degrees. And this is the house of tradition, structures, every type, political, social, um, academic, you name it. All the hardened systems that we have had in place that have carried culture from one moment of time to the next moment of time. And Pluto, one of the slowest moving planets, has been in Capricorn since 2008, and it's making its way out now. But it doesn't do it in one full swoop. It's actually gone in and out of Aquarius, and it will continue to do that, I think up to 5 times before it actually moves there full time for the next, gosh, I can't even remember how many years. Well, 2008 to 2022. Are you good at math? If you are, you tell me how many years that is. And if my memory serves me correctly, I don't think Pluto has been in Aquarius since the beginning, the founding of the United States, this country. And we all know what was happening then. And so Aquarius is the sign of we the people, literally, the sign of revolution, the sign of rebellion. Um, so I don't know if we're going to have something comparable to the US Revolution, but we're definitely going to have some type of revolution. And I'm of the bent that it's going to be a spiritual revolution. It's going to be a revolution of the soul. And this is where we get the glyph for Aquarius, which is the wavy lines. A lot of people think that they're water, but as an Aquarius, I'm of the belief that they are the cosmic waters of life, life energy, like the sign of the non-material aspect of life itself. And that the Aquarius sign is shown as the bearer of these waters. They're flowing out of her vessel, but we are the vessel of the infinite waters of life. And so the real healing is going to be the realization of the truth of our soul. And one level or the next, this last age of Pisces has been what I'm calling the sacrificial age of the wounded soul. Because of the way we were in our evolution, very focused on individualized expression of self, of me and other, which created a certain perception of the world that was based on disconnection from this life force in our body as a result, sadly. But on the other hand, it's an invitation to come back into the waters of life and the sacredness of the fullness of who we are, which includes the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine. And I'm not talking about gender here. I'm talking about the life energies that we all hold. But because many of us have seen as our, let's just say historically, Mars has been related to drive and action and desire in the material plane. That's the lower octave of masculinity, is now being raised to the highest level of Eros, which is love, action from love. But the masculine cannot begin to move from a love until the divine feminine catches up. Not that she was behind, but these two energies reflect each other, and they're kind of one is not able to necessarily evolve until the other one comes with it. And so in this case, when that Mars arises to Aries, then that Venus energy that has been historically connected with flesh and desire and things like the material appearance of things, flesh and form, will be allowed to elevate to her highest level, which is the psyche, right? All the flesh and form represents the beauty of the psyche, which are the waters of life, that material aspect of us that moves and flows into form after form after form. And so it is a coming home, a remembering of not just the material aspects of this yin and yang energy, but the highest form of it, sometimes referred to as the alchemic marriage. And sometimes this is difficult because people look at their conditions in their life and they look for that outward expression of a lover, of a companion. And I don't know because I haven't done any official scientific studies, but from my conversations with people and my observations of people, there seems to be like the highest level of single people, maybe, that has ever occurred in history. Relationships breaking down, gender roles unclear and confusing, people unsure about how to behave or how to show up in relationship, almost to a crisis level, because there's a deep healing going on internally from the sacrificial heart, where I must sacrifice my will to an outside authority or some organization, some religious group who knows or has a more authentic or direct connection to spirit or God, into one of communion with life itself, into the sacredness of life itself that is only accessed within, and that no outside group or person can actually offer you. And what happens when we have the masculine, who has, as I mentioned, historically represented by Mars, passion, drive, desire, out in the world, um, moving from a separate self. If it sees itself separate, it has to go out in the world and dominate and to take and to force one's will on another. But when that energy gets elevated, begins to see that it's not separate from anyone, and there's nothing to get, because the source of well-being, the source of life, is actually accessible in you, in the psyche, the yin energy. And the yin energy of the psyche is what creates our experience. It is the fluid of consciousness which we impress images upon, which shape our experience of reality. And this has remained out of consciousness for the mind. And so there is a reunion happening, a reconciliation of the mind and the heart, so that things can be put in their proper place. So there's a reciprocity between the mind and the heart is recognized for the incredible magnetic center of creation that it is in the non-physical, and an opportunity to realize what happens when we begin to reconnect with that heart center, and how creating from the heart center is a whole different experience than trying to create through the mind, which is stuck in the physicality of the world, where one must force and shape and go get and all of the things. Not that we won't continue to do that, but it will no longer be the sole venue that we have to be available to create in the world. When we come back into this embodied energy that elevates both sides of the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine, to the level of the soul, which is our true identity. The soul wrapped, the spirit wrapped in the physical body, realizing it is consciousness itself creating experience. Once we come in communion, come back into communion, into community with ourselves, we can come back to community with others in a way that is respectful and healing and wholesome and reciprocal, not based necessarily on trying to compete or one up other people, because we're just actually talking to another fragment of consciousness itself, which is us. And that when all the fragments of consciousness begin to realize their place in creation, then not only do we benefit, but all consciousness benefits. So, this is really, I guess I'll just wrap up with this part, is that really what we're doing is being asked to begin to make peace, to create a relationship where we not only listen to our heart, but we are able to tap in to the intuition and wisdom of our heart, which the mind cannot access. And then we also have the body, right? Taurus rules the body, being in the body. We cannot access this alchemic marriage anywhere but our body. We have our heart that's physically in our body as an energy center. We have our mind physically in our body. And so it is a reconciliation as well of the body. In this way, this is the Trinity. We have the Father energy, we have the Mother energy, and we have the Christ child energy in our bodies. And so it is a familial healing as well. And this inner child is that level of awareness that is available, as it's said in many different traditions around the world, that one must become as a child in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. And what is the kingdom of heaven? Other than being at one-ment with the fullness of who we are, to commune with our own heart, with our own mind, and our own body. No longer placing our authority or our will outside in higher authorities, institutions, groups, political parties, whatever it is, right? And then we become fully in tune with we are creating our experience through our inner technology. It's not outside of us. And as this soul healing occurs, right, we also have Jupiter in Aries. No, excuse me. We have Jupiter. Yes, it is in Aries. Conjunct Chiron, which is the wounded healer, which is all of us. And this is a healing of life energy. And at a material plane, this life energy has been reduced to sexual energy. When it's so much more than that, it's the very energy which animates us, which creates our lives. And so it is going to be a recognition of the power of this energy that uncovers the depth of what we yield no longer reduced to that. Not that it isn't a wonderful confirmation and expression of life, but that we get to have that and so much more. And that no longer becomes quote unquote the booby prize for not being in our power. And this has been the story on this planet for thousands of years now, right? And the feminine, those in female bodies who have a direct connection to source through their second chakra, which is the ability to reproduce life in their body, they are a vessel for it. They're holding that awareness that moves through them. It is the same energy that moves through us all. And that when we begin to cultivate a conscious relationship with it, it becomes more and more available and enlivened. It's like recognizing something for the first time. It's like, how could I have not seen that? How have I could not felt that? How could I have not perceived that? And really, it's because we haven't been ready yet, apparently. And now we're ready. People are preparing as this Pluto, this destroyer, is leaving Capricorn, the, the house of structures, of government, of role in the world, of work, of you name it, all things worldly. And it's coming at the last degree, which is the death of a whole way of the being that's coming to an end. And gosh, we have so much else going on in the sky. I am not a professional astrologer and I don't claim to be one, but I am a student of astrology and have been for most of my life. So I find it incredibly amazing to see the patterns in the sky and the patterns in the world and how they reflect one another. And that phrase, as above, so below, is, in my experience, very accurate. And that as we enter in to the new age, which people have called the Aquarian age, we will begin to see how true this really is. That all those energy channels in our body, the nadis, the chakras, are actually a reflection of the stars in a way. Those who have studied the chakras realize that they are little energy vortexes that almost reflect the image of, like, let's say, a universe. Just so happens to be inside of us. And if you look at a cell, you look at an atom, there is the center, all the electrons moving around it. It is a little universe, and we have billions of them in our body. And that there's a pattern of life that is repeated over and over and over again. And that we have, on many levels, been blinded to our part in this universe as a reflection of the stars and the sky and this infinite plan of creation, which includes us as a central part. And that when we begin to really step into that, moving from the sacrificial heart to the sacred heart, we will be moving into the fullness of who we are, which includes being able to receive who we are. And as a result, this energy, which has been so misunderstood, so misdirected, often abused, causing so much pain and dysfunction and trauma, will be healed. The sexual energy because it will be seen in its proper perspective, in its proper place, and that it's not something outside of us, but our very nature. And when we get this realization that we are, we have access to Source, that soul on a soul level, that soul wound that's represented by the wounded healer, at least in astrology, where Chiron has a wound that never heals, and it happens to be in his groin, which is the region of Source itself, the root chakra, um, where he is able to be healed through his partner or his divine counterpart, which is not external to him, but is part of his own psyche. His wife, Jericho, which is known as the holder and bearer of grace. And the grace is a gift from Spirit that allows one to understand and to step into the unfolding of the reality of who one is, and will free up tons of potential, because that life force is pure potential. And this age of Aquarius is going to be an invitation and a beginning and an exploration of how to use this energy in a way that reflects its organic origin. And that's what's going to shape a new morality, which will help shift our relationship to sex, to desire. And what has happened often is the objectification of other through the ego that we have been given as a poor substitute as love for a lot of people who are functioning from the material plane of consciousness where there's me and you. I mean, am I really seeing you? Or am I seeing my projection of you, what I desire you to be through my psyche? And once I begin to make friends with my own psyche and realize that I'm not experiencing reality as it is, I'm simply addicted to my projection of reality that was produced out of survival, out of my survival brain. And that once I began to dip my toe into these energies, and the new moon in Pisces that's happening on February the 20th at, I think it's first degree Pisces, which are the waters of life, their water sign, that will help wash away the limitations and the wounds. And of course, as that happens, so that washing, which could be almost correlated to, on one level, a baptism, that will begin to wash away the false perceptions and illusions that having a really limited sense of self have allowed us to continue to live in, and to see the repercussions of what these limited ways have been, which have caused us to live into a sacrificial heart. And of course, there will be naturally a lot of grief and sadness, and of course, anger and rage about that. Because it's like a little kid waking up and finding out that the adults around them, the adults which are now us, we're the adults now, haven't been being honest. They haven't given the whole story. They haven't really led on to who we really are because it was easier, because they could boss us around more. They could control us. They could determine our happiness, our sadness. And it just made everything easier for them, right? The adults around us. And now they're not going to have that anymore. And the truth is we gave it to them. We allowed them to do it. We may not have been conscious of it, but now we are. Now we're waking up. Now we're understanding that we are not simply appearances, but so much more alive because of our non-material aspects, right? The soul, the breath, the prana, the chi, whatever you want to call it, comes into the flesh to embody. And so consciousness is dreaming itself up into awakening. And this often doesn't happen unless, at this time, unless there's pain for a lot of people. And so, like I have always, not always, but most recently realized as I work with people and myself, of course, because I'm always on this journey, that what if we could create a life not out of crisis, but out of communion with ourselves, of trust with our own source, which is love, which is a return to self, which is a remembering. And it's all coming back to us now. Today, I was laughing because as I was leaving yoga, they were playing that song by Celine Dion. It's all coming back to us now. And life is filled with spontaneous confirmations and correlations and signs and symbols if we look, because it's our internal world being projected outside. Except we forgot we were doing it. I think it's happening to us. So what happens when the whole world starts to wake up and to realize that I have to address the fighting within? I have to address the battle between this feminine and masculine energy. They both must be given a place to live within me. The happy family, the father, the mother, and the child who becomes available when the two can get along, when they begin to find a true loving relationship, which is an ultimate expression of self-love. And that as each one of us begins to step into communion with this couple within us, and then we just might find its correlation out in the world, because it's the only thing that will truly do. We've tried everything else, right? We've tried settling, we've tried compromising, we've tried selling out. In fact, many of us have for many years because we didn't know that's what we were doing. We didn't know there was another option. But now, I'm telling you, if you're listening to this, there's no other option except to return to that sense of self-love that is going to allow you to stop sacrificing yourself and your heart so you can return to that sacred love that is your birthright, which is everyone's birthright. and that we get to come home to that if we choose to cooperate. We can go kicking and screaming. In fact, many of us have for many years. But we're being asked to learn how to receive that energy in our bodies and in our nature. And I think it's exciting. And I also think it is this rejuvenation of energy and inspiration, the healing of this life force, the healing of sexuality, the healing between the relationships of the masculine and feminine, where nobody has to um, lie, cheat, or steal, because it is your inheritance promised to you. And there's nothing to get outside of you because you already have it. Everything within, but you just couldn't see it until you could. And so there's also a huge dose of forgiveness that's being required, that's being called for. Forgiveness of self, forgiveness of other, and as I mentioned, the grief that's attached to that, and the anger that will inevitably show up. And this is Pluto, this is the unconscious mind, where what we have been refusing to own, to look at, to take responsibility for our own power, is coming home to roost. And so it's the best of times. It's also the worst of times, because we get to clean up our mess. We get to put things in their proper place. And we get to do so with compassion and grace and true love. So that's what I wanted to share with you today on this day of Valentine's Day, where we take time to celebrate, usually on the surface of things. But today I wanted to take some time to delve down a little deeper into the soil of what's being planted and invite you to join me in cultivating the field of consciousness and what we can plant there for our future, for the transmutation of what's dead, so we can clear the field, clear the energy, and begin creating anew. Because that's really what this life energy is: creative, pure, creative life force that we get to yield when we've become mature enough to hold it. That's the caveat, let's say. All right. Sending you all my love for the rest of the month of love, which so happens to be Aquarian season. Thank you. All right. Lots of love. Until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are, and I'll see you soon. I just published part 2 of Healing the Sexual Self, my podcast. It's on Spotify. I'll also put the link in the description of this live if you haven't seen it. I published last week part 1. This week I published part 2. And tomorrow I'm putting out a special bonus before part 3 comes out next week. And it's specifically on the Valentine version of love and what's underneath that. I know. Yeah. And really around the healing of sexuality and how specifically that's shown up in my life. We all have our stories. And wouldn't it be great if we could tell them in a community that could receive and hear and listen for the healing process to occur? All right, bye.